The slap lands before I even understand what is happening. A sharp burst of heat spreads across my cheek, the sound echoing through the kitchen like something breaking inside me. I taste metal. My vision blurs for a moment before it clears enough to see my son standing in front of me. Ryan Hartman, the boy I raised alone, the man I once believed could do no wrong. His eyes are cold in a way I have never seen before. Behind him, his wife Brooke leans against the counter with a quiet smile tugging at her lips. She flicks ash from her cigarette into the sink I scrubbed that morning. A thin line of smoke twists upward and presses into my lungs. My breath catches, shallow and strained. I steady myself against the counter, feeling every one of my 71 years settle into my bones. I had only asked for the window to be opened, just a little air so I could breathe through the heaviness in my chest. My doctor said my lungs would never be the same after decades in a textile plant, but Brooke hates being told what to do in her own home. When Ryan walked in and heard her say that I was complaining again, his hand moved faster than my thoughts. "Maybe now you will stop making problems," he says. His voice is flat, dismissive, as if I am not his mother but a stranger trespassing in his perfect kitchen. Brooke slips her arm through his. She already has her purse in hand, ready for dinner reservations. They leave together, their laughter floating down the hallway before the door closes behind them. I stand alone in the silence, the shape of Ryan's hand burning on my skin. That night I do not cry. I sit in the guest room they insist on calling mine, even though nothing in it belongs to me. I look at my swollen cheek in the dim light and know something has shifted, something that cannot be undone. I take a long breath, reach for my phone, and scroll to a number I have not dialed in years. When Caleb Monroe answers on the second ring, my voice is steady. "Caleb, it is Marlene. I need your help." I was not always this fragile. There was a time when my body could carry bolts of fabric across an entire warehouse without trembling. For 30 years I worked the evening shift at a textile plant on the south side of Detroit. The air there was heavy with lint and chemical dyes, and every breath felt like pulling dust through a straw. But it was a job, and it was what kept my son fed, clothed, and in school. When my husband passed away, Ryan was only 9. Grief made him quiet, and responsibility made me older overnight. I took whatever overtime the plant offered. I walked home with aching feet and raw hands, but I always stopped at the corner store to bring Ryan something small. A new pencil, a pack of his favorite gum, a reminder that even in the hardest seasons I was still trying. By the time he reached high school, I had managed to put together a modest savings. Nothing dramatic, just a little money tucked away from skipped lunches, overtime hours, and mending clothes instead of buying new ones. That money sent him to college. I remember the day we unloaded his suitcases in the dorm hallway. He hugged me quickly, embarrassed by how tightly I held him, but he promised he would make me proud. And he did, at least for a while. He graduated, built a career in finance, married Brooke, and bought a beautiful home in Denver. Marble countertops, a backyard with a fountain, a garage bigger than the apartment he grew up in. I believed him when he said he would always look after me. I believed that all those years of sacrifice would mean something. But belief does not pay medical bills, and when my lungs finally began to fail, I found myself unable to keep up. After decades of working in that plant, the diagnosis was not a surprise. Still, hearing the doctor explain the permanent damage felt like someone closing a door I was not ready to shut. The medications were expensive. The treatments even more so. My savings vanished faster than I expected. With nowhere else to go, I called Ryan. I asked for help. I asked to stay with him until I could manage on my own again. I did not know then that moving into his home would be the beginning of my slow unraveling. From the moment I stepped into Ryan and Brooke's house, I felt like an unwelcome guest wandering through a showroom. Everything gleamed. White walls, white counters, white chairs. There was no softness anywhere, no place for an older woman with shaky hands and slow steps to belong. Brooke greeted me with a smile that did not reach her eyes, then handed me a list of house expectations as if I were a tenant, not family. She explained the rules with the polished tone of someone used to getting her way. The main bathroom was for her and Ryan. I would use the small half bath near the laundry room. Breakfast was a quiet time, and I was not to come downstairs before 9. The thermostat was never to be touched because it interfered with the smart home system. And although I would be staying in their guest room, I needed to contribute $350 toward household expenses. I stared at her, unsure if she was joking. My entire disability check was barely more than $1,000. But Ryan nodded beside her, his arm wrapped casually around her waist. He said it was only fair since they were opening their home to me. I agreed because I had no other choice. The days that followed were a study in slow humiliation. Brooke wrinkled her nose whenever I entered a room, spraying fragrance in the air, as if I brought a storm with me. She said older people carried a smell they could not help, and she preferred her home to feel young and fresh. Ryan would chuckle quietly when she said things like that, as if I should join in on the joke about myself. Meals were awkward. I tried to help with the cooking, but Brooke insisted she preferred to handle the kitchen. She bought food I could not digest easily and rolled her eyes each time I mentioned my dietary restrictions. I began eating simple meals in my room, grateful for the small microwave they allowed me to keep. I noticed how exhausted I became climbing the stairs, how my lungs protested even gentle movement. On days when breathing felt like lifting stones, Brooke would light candles or spray perfume, claiming the house smelled too plain. I kept quiet, even when the scents made me cough so hard I nearly collapsed. Quietly, I began keeping track of everything. I wrote down every payment. I saved every grocery receipt Brooke handed me with a smirk. I took pictures of the mold in the corner of my small bathroom. I recorded how often I skipped medication because I had to choose between prescriptions and their household fees. At the time, I told myself it was just a way to stay organized. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that I might one day need proof of what was happening. I just did not know how soon that day would come. The day everything snapped began like any other. My lungs felt tight before I even sat up in bed, the familiar burns spreading across my ribs. I took 2 slow breaths, reached for my inhaler, and waited for the world to steady. Down the hall, I heard Brooke's footsteps, light and quick, followed by the beep of the coffee machine. By the time I made it downstairs, Brooke was already leaning against the counter with a cigarette in hand. She cracked the kitchen window open barely an inch, more for appearance than intention. Smoke curled through the air, thick and heavy, settling exactly where my breath needed to go. I hesitated at the doorway, pressing my hand to my chest. "Brooke, could you smoke outside today, please?" I asked, careful to keep my voice gentle. "I am having a hard time breathing this morning." She exhaled a stream of smoke toward the ceiling, not bothering to hide her annoyance. "This is my house, Marlene. I will smoke where I want. If it bothers you, maybe stay in your room." I tried again, leaning on the counter for support, just until I catch my breath. The doctor said secondhand smoke makes it worse. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Honestly, you are always saying something is worse. It is exhausting." My chest grew tighter. I reached for the window latch, hoping to let in more air, but Brooke stepped in front of me and closed it with a quick snap. "Do not touch the windows. They mess with the thermostat sensors." My vision swam as I tried to hold myself upright. I could feel the oxygen thinning. I needed help. I needed kindness. Instead, I got footsteps approaching from the entryway. Ryan walked in, loosening his tie. He kissed Brooke on the cheek before glancing at me as though I were a stain he did not remember making. "What now, Mom?" he asked, sighing. Brooke gestured at me with her cigarette. "She is complaining again, said my smoking is upsetting her." I opened my mouth to explain, but the cough ripped through me before the words could form. Ryan's eyes narrowed in irritation, not concern. "You need to stop making everything difficult," he said. I tried to speak. I tried to ask for just a minute to breathe. But before I could finish the sentence, his hand struck my cheek. Hard, cold, final. The world blurred. I tasted blood. Smoke drifted around us like a witness. "Maybe now you will stop causing trouble," he muttered. 5 minutes later, they were out the door, dressed for dinner, leaving me hunched over the counter with the shape of his hand blooming red across my skin. When the door closed, something inside me closed too, something that had been holding on for far too long. That night, I picked up my phone and whispered the name of the only person I believed could help me. "Caleb, it is Marlene. I need you tomorrow." I barely slept that night. Each inhale felt like pulling cold air through cracked glass, sharp and uneven, but my mind stayed painfully clear. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards as they cooled. I lay awake in the guest room they claimed was mine, staring at the ceiling and counting the thin lines of shadow drifting across it. The swelling on my cheek had darkened into a bruise, a deep purple bloom that throbbed every time my heartbeat rose. I touched it once, gently, and felt the sting race down my jaw. But the pain did not frighten me. It steadied me. It reminded me that what happened was real, and that pretending it was a moment of stress or miscommunication would only bury me deeper. Caleb Monroe had not asked for details during our call. He only said to keep everything the way it was. Do not clean, do not pack, do not change a thing. We will need every detail when we arrive in the morning. That one word told me he was already assembling others. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and reached for my old address book. The pages were soft at the edges, worn from years of thumbing through birthdays and reminders. 2 names stood out like anchors. First was Tanya Brooks, a reporter who once lived 2 doors down from me when she was still in school. I watched her grow from a shy teenager into a determined journalist. I cared for her mother when illness kept Tanya away. She answered on the first ring, her voice sharp with instant concern. Send me the address, she said. I will be there with the photographer. The second was Elias Garner. He and Ryan had been roommates their freshman year. I treated him like my own, slipping him sandwiches and laundry money when he was too proud to ask for help. Now he was a forensic accountant. When he heard my voice crack, he did not hesitate. I will look into everything. I will bring the files with me. After the calls, I sat quietly in the dim room. I could hear Ryan and Brooke laughing upstairs, unaware that the foundation of their perfect world had already begun to shift. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself. Tomorrow everything changes. Morning arrived with a gray light that slid gently across the floor of my room. I had not slept, but I felt alert, grounded, more certain than I had in months. When I glanced in the mirror, the bruise on my cheek was stark and undeniable. I took a picture of it, the last piece of evidence I needed. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Brooke sat at the kitchen island with yogurt and her tablet. Ryan scrolled through his phone, sipping coffee. They did not look up when I entered. To them, nothing unusual had happened. To them, last night was already forgotten. Good morning, I said, my voice calm. Morning, Ryan mumbled, still reading. The clock on the wall clicked loudly toward 9. I held my cup with both hands, feeling the warm ceramic steady me. At exactly 9, the doorbell rang. Ryan frowned. Are you expecting someone? Yes, I said, setting down my coffee. Brooke looked up sharply. For what? The bell rang again, firmer this time. I walked to the door with steps that surprised even me. When I opened it, the morning air rushed in along with Caleb Monroe. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. His presence filled the doorway with quiet authority. Good morning, Marlene, he said gently. Then his tone shifted as he looked past me. Mr. Hartman, Mrs. Hartman? Ryan appeared behind me, confusion twisting his features. What is this? Before I could answer, 2 more figures stepped onto the porch. Tanya Brooks with her camera bag and another man from her team. Behind them stood a woman holding a clipboard and wearing a county badge. Adult Protective Services, she said. We received a report of possible elder neglect and financial exploitation. Brooke shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. We have done nothing wrong. Caleb stepped inside. Actually, there is quite a lot to address. He opened his briefcase and laid out documents on the entry table. Photos of my room. Pictures of the damp spot spreading in the corner of my small bathroom. Screenshots of the household charges Brooke submitted to me each month. And finally, the photo of my face taken only an hour earlier. Ryan paled. Mom, what are you doing? Before he could step closer, another voice entered the house. I would not say anything without legal advice, Ryan. Elias Garner walked through the doorway holding a neatly organized stack of folders. His expression, normally warm, had hardened into something cold and precise. I have reviewed your financial records, he said, placing the files beside Caleb's. You and Brooke earn enough to live comfortably. Very comfortably. Yet you charged your mother $350 a month from her disability check for a guest room she could barely breathe in. The APS investigator wrote rapidly, her pen clicking with each detail. And this, Elias added, tapping a page, is how much you spent at restaurants last month. Enough to pay for her medication 10 times over. Brooke's face flushed with anger. We are allowed to have a lifestyle. Not at the cost of your mother's dignity, Elias replied. Tanya lifted her camera. I will also need statements for the story we are publishing. Neglect in affluent neighborhoods is something the public needs to understand. Brooke stepped back as if the words were physical blows. The investigator looked up at me. "Mrs. Whitford, you cannot safely remain in this home." Ryan lifted his hands, panicked. "Wait, we can fix this. We can talk about this." Caleb closed his briefcase. "Talking time is over. Today we act." And in that moment, standing in the center of their immaculate kitchen, I felt the first breath of real freedom touch my lungs. The hours that followed felt strangely calm, as if the storm had already passed and I was simply watching the debris settle. The APS investigator completed her assessment with quiet efficiency. She asked me questions about my medications, my mobility, my expenses, and my safety. I answered them all honestly. There was no reason to hide the truth anymore. When she finished, she closed her file and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Whitford, you cannot stay here. This environment is unsafe and emotionally harmful. We will arrange immediate relocation." Brooke threw her hands into the air. "This is unbelievable. We gave her a place to stay. We fed her. Caleb cut her off. "You charged her for household expenses that exceeded her entire budget, failed to provide a safe living environment, and allowed emotional distress to escalate into physical harm. That is not caregiving, that is exploitation." Ryan swallowed hard, staring at the floor. "Mom, I did not mean for things to get so bad. I was stressed, we both were." Elias stepped forward, his voice cool. "Stress does not justify financial manipulation, nor does it justify a grown man striking his mother." The investigator nodded. "We will be filing a formal case with the county. There will be follow-up visits, and your cooperation is legally required." Brooke's face drained of color. "Legally required, are you saying?" "Yes," Caleb said, "and in addition to the county investigation, we will be pursuing civil action. Restitution for all payments taken from Marlene, full coverage of her medical costs, a public written apology, and a mandatory no-contact order unless she initiates communication." Ryan finally looked up, desperation etched across his face. "Mom, please, we can handle this privately. You do not need lawyers or reporters." Tanya adjusted her camera strap. "Privacy ended the moment you allowed harm to occur." The APS investigator touched my arm lightly. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" Before I could answer, Caleb spoke. "She will stay in my family's guest house for as long as she needs." Brooke scoffed. "So you are just going to take her away?" Caleb's voice was firm. "No, I am ensuring her safety, something you should have done months ago." As I stepped toward the door with my small suitcase, I did not look back. The weight on my chest felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without asking anyone's permission. Moving into Caleb's guest house felt like stepping into a different kind of quiet. Not the uneasy silence of Ryan and Brooke's home, where every sound felt judged, but a peaceful hush filled with soft light and space to breathe. The small cottage sat behind Caleb's main house, surrounded by trees that moved gently in the wind. When I opened the windows, the air smelled clean, untouched by smoke or chemicals. The first night there, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No footsteps pacing above me. No whispered complaints through thin walls. No fear of coughing too loudly. Just rest. Caleb's wife stopped by the next morning with groceries and a warm blanket she said reminded her of her grandmother. Tanya visited that afternoon, eager to show me the early draft of her article. She wrote about the hidden epidemic of elder neglect in comfortable neighborhoods, about how silence protects the wrong people. She asked if I was comfortable being named. I nodded. If my story could help someone else, then it was worth sharing. Elias dropped by later with a second-hand recliner he insisted was perfect for my lungs. He placed it by the window so I could see the garden. He told me he would help set up a simple budget plan and make sure my medical bills were handled correctly from now on. Days passed and I began to rediscover small joys I had forgotten. Morning sunlight on the table, the hum of a kettle, the freedom to take a deep breath without fear of inhaling smoke. I learned to slow down, to sit without bracing myself for criticism. My lungs began to stabilize, and for the first time in years, my doctor used the word improvement. Letters started arriving after Tanya's article went public. Notes from older parents. Notes from adult children who felt guilty. Notes from people who simply wanted to say thank you for reminding them that dignity matters. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. And slowly a new life began to settle around me like a warm, steady blanket. It happened on a Thursday morning, one of those soft, quiet days when the world feels gentle. I was sitting by the window in the recliner Elias brought me, watching the branches sway outside, when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. Caleb was at work. Tanya usually texted first. Elias never arrived without calling. A flicker of unease settled in my chest. When I opened the door, only a small crack, I froze. Ryan stood on the porch. He looked nothing like the polished, confident man I had watched walk out of his house weeks earlier. His shoulders slumped, his eyes were red, his clothes were wrinkled, as if sleep had not visited him in days. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Mom," he said quietly, "please, I just need a few minutes." "You are not supposed to be here," I replied. The no-contact order was not a suggestion. "I know." His voice cracked. "I just needed to say something to you before I lose the courage." He swallowed hard, shifting his weight. "I am sorry. For everything." He held out an envelope, his hand trembling. "This is $30,000. It is what I can access quickly. I know it does not make up for what I did. Nothing will, but you should have it." I did not take the envelope. "Money was never what I needed from you, Ryan." His face twisted with regret. "I know that now. When you left, when the investigation started, everything fell apart. Brooke blamed me for ruining her career. She moved out. My firm asked me to resign. People look at me differently now, like they see the worst part of me before anything else." "Actions have consequences," I said softly, "even when they come from people we love." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I miss you. I miss who I used to be when you believed in me." I studied him, the boy I raised, the man who hurt me, the stranger still standing on my porch. "You can still become someone better," I said, "but that journey is yours now, not mine. I cannot walk it with you." Pain flickered across his face, followed by a slow nod. "I just wanted you to hear me say I love you, even if I failed you." "I believe you, Ryan, but love cannot live where respect has died." He stepped back, defeated but sincere. "If you ever need anything," he whispered, "I will come. Even if you never speak to me again." I closed the door gently. It was not rejection, it was release. After Ryan left, I stood in the quiet of the cottage for a long moment, breathing in the stillness. No raised voices, no drifting smoke, no tension waiting for me around the next corner. The air felt lighter, as though the space itself understood something had been set right. I walked back to the window and sat in the recliner. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, brushing their branches together with a soft rustling sound. For years I had believed strength meant staying silent, holding on, enduring. But strength can also be the moment you finally step away. My story is not about revenge. It is about reclaiming dignity, about remembering that no matter how much we sacrifice, we are still worthy of respect. No one, not even our own children, has the right to diminish our value. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt small inside your own home, or overlooked by the people who should have loved you most, hear me now. Your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Sometimes the quietest choices become the loudest turning points. If this story of Marlene Whitford resonated with you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that courage often begins with a single decision to say enough. Leave a comment about what part of her journey stayed with you, and consider subscribing for more stories that reveal the hidden strength we carry inside us. You are not invisible, you are not alone, and your comeback might already be waiting for you to take the first step.